Hi, folks. Welcome to the Prepared Homestead News Brief. We've got some things going on that are directly affecting people, and I wanted to cover it today because, well, it's a good idea to stay on top of what's going on. You know that. I mean, maybe you just maybe able to figure out how much time you have left before it all comes to an end. I mean, that's part of keeping up on it, is just so that you can know how much time you got left to stock away your beans and your bullets before you can't get them anymore. Have you guys been paying attention to this fire thing? You know, I talked about it last week. The big wildfires in Canada, and man, they're not getting any better. I don't know if you folks have seen any of this footage, but check this out here. This is some footage here at the George Washington Bridge in New York and New Jersey. It is absolutely devastating. I mean, you can't even see. I saw one person comment that it's the best that New York has ever looked. But that is the smoke coming down from the wildfires up in Canada, and it's all over. There's advisories all the way down the eastern seaboard. They're saying that right now the air oxygen levels and the air pollution levels in New York is the worst it's ever been on record, even worse than 9/11. That one sounds hard to believe, but, I mean I mean, that's not what we're supposed to do, is believe the media and believe the government, but, I mean, it certainly looks bad. It's so bad that the FAA has grounded flights, because of the wildfire smoke. At first, they tried to slow the traffic down, and then they finally just grounded it. This is Monday. Look at this picture here. This is Monday, New York. This is today, Wednesday. Is that not crazy? But here it talks about how they did a ground stop has been issued for Newark Liberty International Airport, New Jersey, and LaGuardia in New York because of low visibility. I would say so. I mean, you can't see anywhere. But it's not just New York and the wildfires that's polluting this world, really. Hawaii is doing its part too. It's not just you in your gas guzzling vehicles. It's also nature. The Kilauea volcano erupts a second time this year, and while this one may not be a massive, large eruption, when these volcanoes erupt, they spew out a lot of pollutants, a lot of carbon dioxide and stuff, way more than any one of you could ever produce in probably 100 lifetimes. But it is erupting again, which, on a side note, seeing more and more activity along that ring of fire. Are we getting close to some catastrophic black swan event? Ring of fire going off, major volcanic eruption somewhere along that, or maybe even causing the Yellowstone caldera to go? Don't know. But it's certainly a lot of stuff happening over there: earthquakes, volcanoes, wildfires. It's just sounds biblical to me. Speaking of biblical, the drought that has been plaguing the United States for the last few years has gotten so bad that it's affected 34% of the corn crop in the United States. Here's some maps here showing where it's affecting, predominantly here in the Midwest, which is the Corn Belt. They're expecting prices to be the worst that they've been in 30 years, that there's a corn shortage, and the prices are skyrocketing because of that corn shortage. And as much as I don't want to admit it, corn is probably the number one major food staple in the United States, at least. In other countries, it's probably wheat. I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers to see, is wheat a little higher than corn here, but corn is used in everything in ways that it shouldn't be. These high fructose corn syrups and ethanol and things like that we really shouldn't be using or eating because they're not good for us. But nevertheless, it comes from corn. And if there's a lot less corn and corn is more expensive, then you can expect to see things increase. But don't fret because, yeah, Monsanto, I mean Bayer, because they bought out Monsanto, has figured out a short term genetically modified corn that can be safely grown I mean, hurdles still remain, like destroying your body and your gut health, and you're causing inflammation and causing you to die soon. Maybe, maybe not. But hey, it's sarcasm, censors, YouTube censors. It's sarcasm. Okay. I'm not spreading disinformation. It's sarcasm. It's okay. It used to be called comedy. I know that comedy now has to be politically correct, but it used to be a time where people could say offensive things and call it comedy and everyone laughed. Trust me, I grew up in the 80s. It was pretty commonplace then. But seriously, Bayer apparently has figured out some kind of new genetically modified corn, and that's going to save us all. And we're going to need it because the banks are, well, they're collapsing even more, or at least they will. Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, has said the banking collapse, the banking stuff is not over. Now, they're not calling it a collapse. They're calling it a consolidation, because we have to use just the right word so that people don't panic. I mean, they've already withdrawn almost $500 billion out of banks over the last year, but we're not going to say anything to cause people to panic and make them think there actually really is a problem. Let's just say we're consolidating. It's going to be better. It's going to make banking way more efficient. When there's only one or two or three banks in the country, trust me, things will be so much better, so much more efficient. I mean, you'll have branches to your bank everywhere you go because it's going to be the only bank out there. But she says that more is possible because there's a lot of the regional and smaller banks that just aren't looking good. And one thing, if there's one thing we've learned about the economy over the last 3 years and the things that they've been doing to destroy it, is to kick out all the little mom and pop and the small businesses and consolidate it up and gobble it up into the big monstrosity corporations that's run by BlackRock. That's right. I mean, that's the American way, isn't it? Speaking of the American way, doctors, well, not doctors, an AI doctor, this is artificial intelligent computer, is doing a better job at predicting patient outcomes, and it's doing a better job at predicting patients' deaths. That's right. That's right. Artificial intelligence now is doing a better job than the entire medical community at predicting what your health is going to be like and when you will die. And they're probably pretty good at predicting your death, since at some point they'll probably be in charge of it, because already we've been seeing countries like Canada incorporate medically assisted suicide as this wonderful thing. And while I don't have the graphic for it, right now they're saying last year 3.3% of the Canadian population chose this medically assisted path. Interesting, that number, 3.3, 3 and 3. You hear that a lot. You know how I tell you, you hear the 2030 year a lot. They always say in 2030 it's going to be this. Same way with the 2 3s. You always see that. Moving on to things that we all shake our head at. NATO members may send troops to Ukraine. According to the former NATO chief, he is saying that there are certain NATO countries that may be willing to put troops on the ground in Ukraine if member states, including the United States, do not provide tangible security guarantees to Kyiv at the alliance summit. So they're saying, hey, we're not going to guarantee you anything. We're not going to say we're going to protect you like a NATO state. And if you're okay with that, we just might send some of our troops over. Do they not think that this is going to just cause an even more major escalation? World War III, hello? I mean, it's bad enough that uh, pretty much at this point, it has to be nearly 100% of all the equipment, all the technology, all the guns, the bullets, the bombs, the planes, the tanks, everything that's being used in Ukraine against Russia comes from NATO. Well, 98.9% probably comes from the United States, and the rest of that, like 0.1%, probably comes from the rest of NATO countries. But and then now they're talking about sending troops, and they think that's going to make things go good. Speaking of ammunition and bombs and tanks and all that, U.S. munitions stockpile too low to defend war over Taiwan. So this is a little scary. Uh, that we're saying now that we can't even defend. Here we go. The Army Secretary said the United States munitions production capacity is pushed to the absolute edge just to keep up with the war in Ukraine, just to keep up with that war. And while I mean, is it a big war? Is it as big as World War One and World War Two? It doesn't appear to be, but there is a lot of destruction. I mean, it's in pretty small little region of eastern Ukraine. But my goodness, if our in military industrial complex, which we all probably despise, can't even keep up with the munitions that we're sending over to Ukraine, then we have a problem, folks. I mean, and here's the thing: we're constantly pushing and prodding China, it seems, but that doesn't matter. I mean, we're because they're probably going to stage some kind of event that would cause everything to all come together under one banner, so that just one world leader will rise up and bring about this false peace. I mean, peace to the world, so that we can all be under one central government and one central religion. I know that that sounds absolutely crazy, but it's going to happen eventually someday. Maybe today, maybe in the future, maybe in the distant future, but it will happen because, well, the end of the Bible tells us that it'll happen. All of the stuff that we're seeing play out, yeah, it's taking us further down that path, folks. That's all it is. It's further down that path of the Great Reset, of their Agenda 2030 plan, of global domination. Consolidation of everything. Was reading an article either this morning or yesterday talking about how California is going to do a universal basic income for illegals, and that universal basic income is the future. That we're going to start seeing that. They tested it out during COVID, um, with all the checks that they were sending everyone. That was how they was testing it out. We're going to see some other catastrophic event or an economic collapse or a pandemic or something, and that's when they'll step in with universal basic income. But of course, you're going to have it in central bank digital currencies, and you're going to need a digital ID to access that. See? And to get that digital ID, you need to make sure you got all these things, and your thumbprints and your retinas and probably blood samples and everything else. Something they've been pushing in Australia for the last year or so is a 100-point identification system just to be able to access the internet. Yeah. That means you need to submit 100 different points of identification, whether it be photo ID, retinal scans, DNA, urine scans, hair samples, fingerprints, palm prints, everything else, just so that you can access the internet. This kind of stuff is happening. The big brother that we probably many of you grew up around hearing about and kind of laughing and saying, oh, it's going to happen someday. Well, someday we're going to have some kind of 1984 civilization world. Well, that someday that you talked about all those years, it's here. We are living it right now. We are living in those times. And if you are not preparing yourself in some way, and not just any way, but in the most possible way that you can prepare, getting your houses in order mentally, physically, and spiritually is about the only way that you can make it through this. Making sure that your heart, your soul is lined up, that you are as sanctified and dedicated and spotless as you can be spiritually, with your relationship with God the Father, His Son, through the Holy Spirit. And then you need to be mentally prepared. You need to be capable of psychologically handling the radical catastrophic changes that we are facing today, and that we will face. And then you need to be physically ready. You need to be physically as fit as you can. You need to have the access to the food and the equipment and the tools to survive and to be self-sufficient. And you need to have the skills to know how to use all those things. You need to be getting yourself ready, folks. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.